around. So that helped me own it. I thought, after years and years of giving presentations and workshops, writing 2 books, I realized at a certain point in my career about personas that there was no question that anyone could ask me that I could not answer. And that gave me this boost of confidence that flew over into my professional work as a consultant, right? I don't even really do personas that much anymore. But confidence was me. And then something happened. And I'm going to tell you what that was. Somewhere in New York City, our story begins. A man named Ken Seif, who has been my rainmaker for a long time, I've known him since 2002, since I was at Amazon, and I've been working with him ever since. He's become a venture capitalist. For a long time, he was running a venture capital firm that was focused on e-commerce technologies. I could do that with no problem. I could walk in and say things like, the buy button should be above the fold. And people would say, oh my God, she's so good. Thank God we have her. One day he called me and he said he was getting a little tired of e-commerce, as one does, and he was starting a new fund for this thing called blockchain. And I was like, oh God, right? So he said, I want you to get involved in the new fund. I want you to help me evaluate whether the companies are worth anything, and I want you to help these companies. And I said, okay, how hard can it be? And so, like you, do you believe in this statement? This is what he came to me with, that blockchain will be as disruptive as the internet. How many believe that blockchain will be as disruptive as the internet? The slide just updated, in case you didn't notice. How many of you actually think you know what blockchain is? A few of you know what blockchain is. A few of you know some of what blockchain is. None of us know all of what blockchain is, because that's not possible. So I started researching what blockchain was. And I came to this. Blockchain is a software solution or protocol for reaching agreement or consensus within a leaderless, decentralized group of peers, peer-to-peer, that events have occurred as they occur, meaning they're synchronized, and that of those, each event is recorded in an indisputable, immutable historical list or ledger, which each peer has a copy of. Yeah, that was my response. So I started getting very, very nervous. The imperturbable, incorruptible Superman of UX was freaking out a little tiny bit. Because I thought, oh, it doesn't matter what the new technology is. Like technologies before it. Streaming media back in the day. Community features. Personalization. Any of that stuff was no big deal. HTML5, right? None of that stuff was really that big of a deal. It's all the same. So I thought, no big deal, I can handle this. I started to try to look for better descriptions of what blockchain actually was. And by the way, I've been working deeply in blockchain since the summer. And in order to write this presentation, I had to go back to Blockchain for Dummies just to figure it out for myself. So I've been doing this for months, and I still don't understand this crap. And I want you to understand that, because if it can happen to me, it can happen to you, and that's the whole point. So really what blockchain is, and I want to teach you a little bit about it so that you're never in my position, it's a public ledger of information, and it sits on top of the internet, and the way this information is recorded is what makes blockchain groundbreaking. I know, you still don't know what the hell it is, and that's fine. In its simplest terms, it is the technology that enables transactions to be safe, reliable, transparent, and permanent. And underlying all this stuff is sophisticated cryptography that makes sure that it is absolutely unassailable. So I've been learning about it, and I want you to really see what that's like. And you do have to run fast, and you can keep up. It's no problem. I mean, it's not changing that often, and as long as you're really running fast and putting all of your brains to use, then you should be fine. And so maybe you just go back to some basic diagrams. So this is what blockchain is. This is the best minds in the world making blockchain as simple as humanly possible. So great, now I know what blockchain is. This stuff, there is technology that was capable of making me feel like a total idiot. It even made me forget almost everything I knew about good UX, even though I'm starting to remember that now. Because the people who are in this are so in it that they think everyone should know it. And unlike any other project I'd ever done, like if you throw anything technical with respect to e-commerce at me, I can learn it in about a day and a half. In fact, I tell people all the time when they're applying for jobs, if they don't feel like they're qualified for one of the lines on the job description, I tell them 2 weeks, 2 books, you'll be fine. 2 weeks, 2 books was not helping, okay? So I want to tell you some of the key concepts of this. I'm going back and forth between how it's so hard, and I just wanted to teach you some basics about it because it's really interesting, and I think all of us are going to have to know about it. One of the key concepts and key important things about blockchain is that it's decentralized and distributed. So when you call a cab and you call a yellow cab, you're calling one company and they send out a cab that belongs to them, right? When you call an Uber or ask for an Uber on your phone, a private citizen gives you a ride. However, Uber is still a company that's in charge of all that and gets a fee, right? Fully distributed is you get a ride from a private citizen who you don't know without any company in between. Doesn't that sound palatable? Like the Craigslist of rides. It's also got the word trustless associated with it, which is ironic because actually the word trustless in this case means that it's extremely trustworthy. Trustless means you don't have to trust any one individual in a blockchain scenario. If I call Yellow Cab, I have to trust Yellow Cab. Even if I call Uber, I have to sort of trust Uber if I snake bracelet. But if lots and lots of people are in charge, I don't have to trust any one of them. I just have to trust the whole system, which makes me it trustless, and then I don't have to trust any one person. So I want to get all analogy-y on you so that you can understand this. Picture a spreadsheet that is duplicated thousands of times across a network of computers. Then imagine that this network is designed to regularly update the spreadsheet, and you have a basic understanding of the blockchain, which is true. I'm going to walk you through this. So imagine that I gave Ashby 25 cents on 11/8/2016 at 6:45 p.m. And imagine that that gets turned into some super cool cryptography called a hash. And then as every single little transaction was added onto this, including Ginormous Bank bought 4,532 ETH from Coinbase, all the hashes get updated and they're all dependent on each other, okay? A block is a full spreadsheet. That's what a block is. It's a whole bunch of individual transactions grouped together, and all of this cryptography is all intertwined and intertwinkled and more complicated than I can ever imagine and has crazy words associated with it, right? So if any one thing changes, it's going to cause a kerfuffle across the whole thing. A blockchain is a series of blocks, right? So gazillions of tiny things like me giving Ashby 25 cents worth of Bitcoin get added onto these, and then they all get added together, and it becomes a blockchain, which I think is also called a ledger. I think a ledger and a chain are the same thing, but I'm not entirely sure. So take that with a grain of salt. Now, what happens to that blockchain? In each of these little computers is a little chain. That entire chain, this entire thing that I showed you right here, is copied onto each of these nodes. A node is an individual computer, right? You might have heard the term blockchain mining. It's basically a system that says thank you, usually financially, for people letting the blockchain use their computers. Now the spreadsheet is everywhere, and when something is everywhere, anyone can see it. If you have a number associated with an account that I have on blockchain, you can see exactly how many Bitcoin or whatever is in it. By the way, I'm saying Bitcoin and Ether, cryptocurrencies work because of the blockchain, just like email works because of the internet. Sits on top of it, right? So the reason Bitcoin is so cool is because you can actually track who owns stuff even when stuff doesn't exist. Like Bitcoin doesn't actually exist. Even if a hacker could get to one copy, he can never get to all the copies. Whoa. He turned Ginormous Bank to HackerMan. And HackerMan now apparently bought 4,000 something Bitcoins, right? So easy as that, he now owns all of that Bitcoin, which is, by the way, a lot, right? But something now goes awry over here in the coded area, which I'm not getting into because I don't understand it. Well, no, wait, because I don't understand it. So now, this version of the blockchain, sure, he hacked it, it's a spreadsheet. I mean, it's not a spreadsheet, but sure, he changed something in there, and now he's like, all done. I now own all of that Bitcoin. But what happens is this. Right? This guy's particularly irritated because he's seen this before. It doesn't match all of the other versions of this blockchain that exists on all these other computers. So they all together say, nope, not kosher. Okay? And the network will always notice changes. This guy has only one phrase that he uses. This is called synchronization, and synchronization happens over and over and over and over and over. It also takes a little while, which is why sometimes it takes a little while for new transactions to actually show up and get confirmed on the blockchain. That's what that means, right? So let's get even more analogy-y. This is a great analogy. I did not make it up. Martin G. made it up, and it's really cool. So imagine a bunch of kids playing soccer. They're just playing a pickup game of soccer. They're at the playground playing soccer. They all know the basic rules of soccer, right? And they're playing. Who keeps the official score? You tell me. Where's the official score? Their head. One head? All heads. It is everywhere. All of them keep score. Who's in charge of keeping the score? All of them. No one. Right? Nobody said you're in charge of keeping the score. They're all like, it's 2-1. How fast is the official score updated when there's a goal? You tell me. Instantly. Right? What if someone tries to just cheat? This one looks a little, I don't know. All of a sudden he's like, my team has 3, not 2. What happens? You tell me with the kids. Denied. No! Jeremy! Although, sorry, I used your name. It is not all of them throw a fuss, right? I mean, especially, this is why it works especially with kids soccer, because like kids are not having any of it, right? How trustworthy is each player if you ask him or her the score? Pretty damn trustworthy, right? There's incentive for them to keep the correct score, because if they agree with awful Jeremy, sorry, I started, I can't stop. He's not awful, he's actually great, but the kid version of him was terrible. Anyway, if somebody else teams up with Jeremy, the whole team will go against both of them. Do all the kids trust each other? I don't know, kinda, but you know, Jeremy took that box of Mike and Ike's the other day, and I think it came back one short, and do the kids trust the system? Absolutely they do. Okay? Next. All right, up. So now let's look at what we know about this horrible thing that I showed you before. Blockchain is a software solution, you know a software solution, for reaching agreement, consensus, we know what that is now, right? Within a leaderless and decentralized group of peers, peer-to-peer, that events have occurred as they occur, synchronized. When the score changes in everybody's head. And that of these, each event is recorded in an indisputable, immutable historical list or ledger, right? Which each peer has a copy of, distributed. That's the basics of blockchain. Now you know, right? Why do we care? Think about when the internet was first invented, which was probably before most of you were breathing. It changed things in waves. It completely changed communication. The first time I used the internet was to send a crappy-ass email from a command line interface to somebody that was sitting across from me at a different desk, right? And now it's everywhere. The communication has totally changed. Information sharing. If I had told you if somebody had come to me with a use case saying, well, let's take all research librarians and put them online so that you can just type a question in somewhere and all the information in all the world will be right at the fingertips. There's about 1,000 things each of us could find wrong with that use case. It's not viable, it's stupid, it's not needed, it's a tremendous amount of work, the devil is in the details, it's a horrible idea why research librarians are working. It's not a bad deal, it's free. Like, why would you do that? And now, for like research librarians, right? The use cases made no sense, but it still started happening. And then transacting. As user experience people, think about when our predecessors, our ancestors in UX, had to deal with the idea of we want people to put their credit card number and their social security number in a website. Now you do it, you don't even think. You don't even look for the S in HTTPS anymore. You're just like, right? But think about how hard that must have been to get regular people to put their social security number in this thing that was sort of notoriously scary and they didn't understand it. So just like these big words got totally changed by the internet, blockchain is going to totally change some other big ones that we can't get our heads around right now, like trust. And by the way, transacting again. I mean, the basics of transacting, like putting in your credit card, that changed. Actual transactions between people and companies, this is going to completely change. Okay? And identity. Right now, when you go to buy a bottle of beer, as one does, let's go buy a bottle of beer. That was just a weird way to say that. If they ask for your card, which they haven't for me in an annoyingly long amount of time, you give them a card that has your age. What else does it have? It has your weight, 20 pounds under what it actually is. It has your home freaking address, right? It has whether you're an organ donor. It has way too much information. All they need is a green light, red light if you're over 21. Identity is going to change in that way, where you own all of your identity, and you're able to dole it out in pieces that are appropriate, which we can't even get our heads around. I know, I see you, because that's how I feel. I'm like, why? This is dumb. It's working. What? No. Okay, that's how I've been feeling too. So what's the big deal? What's the difference between eBay and Craigslist? Fundamentally, they do the same thing, right? Come on, what's the difference between buying something on eBay and buying something on Craigslist? Trust.
You might get stabbed.
Huh?
You might get stabbed.
Might get stabbed. Murder. That's what I was looking for. The difference between eBay and Craigslist is murder. What? Geography is going, although you can shop locally on eBay, right? And you do have buy it now prices. Huh? Bidding. Yeah. But really I was looking for murder. Okay? What if you could see a reliable trust score for every individual buying or selling on Craigslist? By the way, Craigslist is distributed. There is no Craigslist Incorporated that gets a portion of every, although they do if you're posting jobs, whatever. But with respect to buying and selling at our level, it's totally peer-to-peer and it's distributed. There's a different Craigslist for every city, right? It's a great model of that. Whereas eBay is centralized. Decentralized to a certain extent, centralized. Okay? What if you could look up a detailed history of each item knowing the history couldn't be faked? You're buying a 1992 Honda Accord, you can not only see the accident history, you can see every time it was detailed, you can track back the parts down to a nut and a bolt to see if they were harvested in a sustainable manner, right? Which, by the way, is also a terrible idea because we can't even choose, like, a pencil on Amazon right now because there's too many to choose from and too much information. I'm just going to come back to it later and maybe I'll get a pencil somewhere else. Maybe there's one under the couch. This is too much. That's the promise of blockchain. Craigslist without the murder. So the potential applications for blockchain are nearly endless. Simply put, it can be used for any transaction requiring a contract or one regarding the need for a verified chain of activities and or product ownership, which now you understand, right? You're welcome. You understand this quote. This is all the use cases. Financial use cases, one of which I'm involved in right now in one of my clients. Non-financial use cases, one of which I'm involved in right now with one of my clients. They're all over the place. Oh, and by the way, absolutely none of the user interfaces in blockchain are good. This is blue sky UX land, ladies and gentlemen. They need us, and they need us bad. And they all know the UIs suck. Oh, and it's just UIs that have to do with transacting, I don't know, the equivalent of millions of freaking dollars, the value of which can change in 5 minutes from here to here. No big. UIs don't matter. That's what I thought. first project. That's me in the middle. What happened on my first, what happened is continuing. I went in there and I'm like, I'm a hamster too. I can run this wheel just as good as anybody, and I'm going to come and just run right along with you, agile, schmagile, we can do it, it's going to be great, MVP, blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, what the hell is going on? What are they talking about? This strategy that they have makes no sense. Every single use case or strategy for a business that I've heard of makes no sense. I could argue for a really long time against any of the businesses that I'm working with. They're going to happen anyway. It's like the reference librarian analogy. I could argue against it till the cows come home, and boy, howdy, would I have ever been wrong, right? I'm not used to that. I'm looking for a great use case with great problem statement and great business goals, and then once we define it, we can build it, and they're like, nah, we know exactly what it is, and the reason you're not keeping up is because you don't understand the technology. And it started to chip away at me a little bit. So I went back and I looked. And by the way, I created this word cloud from a big blockchain article. I just threw it in, and then I looked carefully, and look at that. Right in the middle of blockchain. Hard. That was validation. Didn't help much, but it was kind of funny. The words that I have been telling you are only a couple. You now know this much about blockchain, some of the fundamentals, right? To design a better interface for email, you don't have to know how packets work. Arguably, I shouldn't have to know how the blockchain works in order to design better interfaces for it. Unfortunately, that's not true. A lot of blockchain is going to do things like if we rewired this room completely, and it was like a 5-month project to completely rewire all of the electricity in this room, I would still turn that light switch on and off. My experience as a consumer wouldn't change at all. But when it does change, oh boy, it changes a lot. And it changes in areas of things like my money, which are things that I'm particularly sensitive about. Oh, yeah, no, it's only funny the first time. Oops. Meet my clients. They are so in love with this, it's not even funny. By the way, they're all young, which is something that didn't occur to me until later. They're really young. It doesn't matter so much that they're young, but what I needed to come to after a couple months is they've never launched software successfully in their lives. They're geniuses in diapers, right? And they're sure they're right because they are some of the most knowledgeable people in one of the most interesting and difficult technologies on earth. And they know they're right, okay? And they want to run 1,000 million miles an hour. So this is what I started to come up against. And maybe if some of them watch this, they'll listen and hear all of these UX professionals laugh. Laugh on behalf of me, not for me. We're targeting enterprise. Pause. Nope, schools. We're gonna sell schools. Okay, same difference. You're making this too complicated. Yeah, we could just copy the UI for Google Drive. But you have applications in every folder that work on the folders in the drive. And we'll just make them buttons. And I'm like, here's what ends up happening. I am so taken aback by how dumb that is that I am inarticulate in explaining why it's bothering me. And so I end up saying, I am not kidding you guys, I end up saying stuff like, you can't do that. I mean, you're like Google Drive, but you're not completely like Google Drive. And what I'm going to tell you is that in a couple weeks, when you start to design what that actually looks like when you click a button, you're going to run into serious trouble. I'm telling you, you're going to run into trouble. And they're like, we'll just make it look like Google Drive. If they could do it, we could do it. You're making, no big deal. We're literally designing this for ourselves. One company is literally designing software that they will be a primary user for. That's always a great thing. We just need this good enough for MVP, and we need it in 2 weeks. And let's design it so it will work when we add 367 new features. I mean, we should do both things. Yeah, we should do both things. We can't do both things. But all they hear me say is no. I've gone gone from this highly recommended, like these guys, I get recommended into these companies. I don't come in and sell them on me, right? I get recommended in by this guy, Ken, who thinks I walk on water, and he says I'm the best product person he knows. And then I come in, and they're like, yes, we want our UI to be better than anybody else's. And then push comes to shove, and I turn into grandma, which is why I don't get carded. Grandma, I'm not a grandmother. Grandma who keeps saying no. I keep saying slow down. Slow down, design twice, build once. And these are arguments that I haven't had to pull up in 20 years. They're so fundamental about the value of UX and holding steady that I don't remember them. And my friend Mila said, well, you did it 20 years ago, you can do it now. And I'm like, I do not want to do the job I was doing 20 years ago. That sounds freaking terrible. So then another one. Look, here, we went ahead and drew all the wireframes. Do you have any small comments or feedback before we start coding? Let's design this is a real one. Let's design the nav real quick and get it into the next sprint. The nav by itself. So this is what happens. This is my kryptonite. It's my kryptonite because I am not capable of handling this problem. And I'm awesome, right? I'm really good. I can come into almost any company and find a way to help them and see things in a new way. I am screwing up ass over elbows with these 25-year-old startup founders who are designing in blockchain. And it's eating at my confidence. And I'm telling you this because if it can happen to me, it can happen to any of you. And I'm still standing here and I'm talking in front of everybody as a keynote speaker, okay? So if it happens, it's common and it happens to everybody, even the abnormally confident Tamara Adlin. So I'm like, great, go do it, you know? So go ahead and do it, or I'll come in and help you on a piece of it or whatever. And by the way, this all goes in waves. And then what happens? I don't hear from them for 2 weeks. I shit you not. They just go away. Because instead of hearing me say it's hard, they would rather get work done. Oh, we're not going to meet this week because we want to get work done. Right? And I'm so offended and upset that I'm like, and mixed in with all this is my knowledge that I'm not supremely good at understanding blockchain either, so maybe some of this is associated with my ignorance. It's a salad of sad, okay, for me. So then, when this started to happen, one thing I realized in the past week is to remember some really good advice that I got from one of my best bosses ever, Larry Tesler, who, by the way, did the original test on how stiff the mouse cord had to be to get out of the way. And still, anyway, he's a genius, a gentle genius. And he said to me when I was at Amazon, sometimes you have to let it break. And that has been echoing in my brain. Sometimes you have to let it break. But at the same time, I talk all the time about how you have to make yourself more usable. I'm giving presentations about how you have to make yourself more usable, and I'm messing up this badly. Obviously, I am not helping them in a helpful way, so I should change what I'm doing, right? And so I try to just build the nav with them, knowing that we'll come back and fix it because that's what Agile is. Nope. I do that, and the next week, they're just building the apps. The nav is done. So I'm stuck. But then something curious starts to happen. If you both participate and also let it break to a certain extent, they start to run into trouble. Now this is difficult for me because I'm a startup person, a very early stage startup person, and I cost money. And if I'm not super helpful to them in the very beginning, I am in the strategy portion, and then the UX starts, and things go to hell in a handbasket. But eventually they start coming back. Thanks. Eventually they start coming back, right? And they're like, something's weird. These buttons don't seem to make sense when you click them 3 layers into the folder hierarchy. Really? That's a shock, right? So that's my face when that starts to happen. And I do have to wait for that to happen sometimes. And it goes in waves. So then the ongoing relationship looks something like this. Notice that both hamsters are struggling. The other thing to remember that I had to remember for myself is that these guys are as confused about UX as I am about blockchain. They have not done it before. And they know that it's supposed to be really important. Then they see that it takes a bunch of time and is really frustrating because I ask them some really frustrating questions. And they're like, it can't be this hard. And then they find out, wait a minute, it's harder than it looks. And so they're struggling too. Why bother? If all of this stuff seems stupid and is crazy and it's like, I think a lot of us have been why bother about blockchain. Like, I'm good where I am. I don't need to learn about blockchain. Well, I beg to differ. A lot of this stuff is going to happen. As nonsensical as it seems, it's going to happen. Contracting, transacting, anything related to trust, and it's hard to think about things related to trust, they're going to change. Here's my current mood. Yeah, I'm Superman. By the way, that's Ben Affleck as Superman, which is a joke about him doing Batman. Doesn't go over very well. And I'm like, this feels familiar for some reason. Because there's been lots of new technologies that have been wackadoo, right? That have been annoying to learn. Like when community features first started coming out, I was literally working with a bank and they were like, we need to create community features for our bank. And I'm like, who the hell wants to hang out on a bank website? It doesn't even make any sense, right? This has happened before. So I said lots of blockchain changes will be invisible to most people, but the things that will be visible are going to be exceedingly tricky UX problems to solve. Like, how do you have a bank account that also looks like a brokerage account? And, right? It's interesting. So here's the thing I want you to know. Expect to be fixing things that aren't broken and creating things that no user actually wants. So stupid. Expect use cases to make no logical sense. Assume most crazy use cases will actually happen regardless of making no sense. They're going to happen. It's just a matter of timing. Assume all the tech teams are really inexperienced with all things UX. You're going to have to pull out explanations and arguments you haven't had to make in years, if ever. But you need to start biting the bullet and learning a little bit about this now. Because if you learn it slowly, it doesn't choke you quite as badly as if you try to do it the way I did it. So here are my words of wisdom for you. Have faith. You can do this, probably. Right? Whatever this is, and it may not be blockchain for you right now, and it probably isn't. But I bet a lot of you, probably half of you, are facing something that's like a little unnerving, right? And that's why I'm laying this bare, right? Maybe we don't talk enough about failures. And I'm still in the middle of failing miserably. Like, my clients are going to see this video tomorrow. It's going to be an interesting conversation. It may not go well for me. Allow yourself time to learn. Master the basics of blockchain first. Step lightly, they are less experienced than you think. Take time to explain UX fundamentals, process, and methods. Expect to feel way behind the curve most of the time, and rely on the fundamentals of good UX, UI, and IA. Make it easier to remember. Hamster. It spells hamster. Took me a while to make that work. Pretty damn proud of it. So this is my rule for you, my advice to you, my guidance. If you're brave enough to take on, and I'm all about being brave, if you're brave enough to take on ridiculously unfamiliar new challenges, which is sometime you will be, feeling weak and stupid is probably inevitable. And therefore, really common, right? Can't have one without the other. If it's inevitable, it's happening all the damn time. And doesn't have to kill you. There's my kryptonite, my gorgeous, beautiful kryptonite. So Superman, I faced it. It kryptonited me. But thank you. I'm happy to take questions. Or tell you why I wear two different shoes if you don't know. You can raise your hand if you want to know why I'm wearing two different shoes. Okay, there's a lot of you. Okay, so the first time I did World Usability Day, it was going to be broadcast live all over the place, right? And I was late, shockingly, and I was heading out of my house, little Diane von Furstenberg dress, and I had my little leggings, a cute little, and I tried on some shoes, and I went out of the house, and I ran out of the house, and I ran, oh my God, I got the last parking spot, I was so lucky, last parking spot near an elevator at UW campus, and I get into the elevator, and I pull up my tights, and I look down, one brown boot, one black boot. Exactly the same brand, totally different styles, unmissable. And I am in the elevator, late, having gotten the last parking spot, knowing there were no more parking spots, and at least 10 minutes from home. What do you do? Right? You walk across campus in your 2 different boots. And then you show up, and organizers of the conference are like, well, maybe I can lend you my shoes. And I'm like, you know what? Yeah. And I got on stage, and I said to the crowd, how many of you like this boot better with this outfit? How many of you like this boot better with this outfit? And then I said, this is a moment of UX presentation genius. Just brace yourself. User feedback is great, but not if it comes too late. Oh my God, I'm so proud of myself for that. So ever since then, that was a pretty good save. Ever since then, every time I presented at WUD, I've worn 2 different shoes. Okay, questions, comments, concerns, quandaries? There's one.
Thank you so much for speaking. Oh boy.
Lord, man.
I was very loud.
You're welcome.
So I guess the theme of the event, good versus bad UX, or just higher level. Like one of the things I struggle with blockchain is kind of the power consumption, and as far as that goes, how do you think about like that technology and fully supporting it from a careers perspective when you think about like the downstream effects of energy consumption?
Oh my God, I haven't even. Honestly, I've been so underwater, and the deal with me is that for good, bad, or ugly, I have this person that I work with quite a lot, and where he goes, I tend to go, because I trust him so implicitly. And he goes careening headfirst into new things, and I haven't even considered that. I think it's a great question. I think, however, I'm definitely going to be wrong in some of the stuff I say, but I would imagine that some of the giant centralized solutions that are out there are enormous consumers of power, and some of that's going to shift, right, to individual computers and consumers. And possibly I can imagine a world where it's easier for individual consumers or nodes, and not all the nodes are just like Bob and Topeka, but to get solar power or whatever. So maybe there will be some good in with the bad. It's a good point, and I don't know. There's another, yep.
So if one were to want to work in blockchain, to do UX work in blockchain, how would one find good companies, especially since since a lot of them don't have UIs, and we might not easily encounter them in their natural habitats?
Yeah, how I can find good companies, I can tell you how to find companies. Whether or not they're good, I have no flipping idea, right? So I follow Ken around, and he does due diligence to decide whether or not he's going to invest, because he's a venture capitalist. So I let him do the due diligence, and then I try to muddle through, right? To find blockchain companies, there is plenty of opportunity out there to do blogging for UX and blockchain. There's plenty of room out there what I would do is start learning as much as you can, and start looking at some blockchain applications. And maybe that's what I would do, is start writing a blog post, critiques and recommendations for blockchain-related UIs that are already out there. You can look at the wallets, which hold Bitcoin, and there's a zillion of them. It's going to be a confusing world, because there's some information these things have to convey that no other UI has had to convey in the past, which I can't get into because I'm even confused by it. But that's where I would start, is making yourself visible, like on Medium, by just doing some evaluations and some quick fix ideas. And speaking at a conference, there are a lot of blockchain conferences out there. and they would all take a UX speaker, I guarantee it. Yeah.
One more?
I'm happy to. Oh no, time's up.